Welcome to the David F. Haas podcast. I'm your host, David F. Haas, in the podcast room solo today. But I think I came up with a good topic. The way I come up with my topics is I just kind of tune into what's happening in consciousness, and I want to figure out what people are struggling with most. And the thing that came up to me was this idea of busyness. This is like something that's been like really close to me because I had this awareness that in order to speed up, I needed to dramatically slow down. And what I'm finding, even for myself, is that it's so easy to get distracted these days. I made a social media post recently where I was like, here are the top 3 things that you need to know about the pyramids in Egypt. And I actually thought that post was going to go viral, but it didn't. And it probably was because the post was all about, here are 3 things that you don't know about the pyramids in Egypt. And then I kind of did like a record scratch and said, actually, I don't know anything about the pyramids in Egypt. And I was just making this video to highlight how amazing influencers have become at capturing our attention. And if we're not careful, we can get lost in like a 2-hour scroll fest where we just gave away our own hopes and dreams to watch somebody else live out their hopes and dreams. And that realization kind of led me to like what I've been feeling has been happening in consciousness with really, which is like it's kind of started with social media, but really it was like TikTok. I think that really found a way to utilize their algorithm to keep you on that platform. And it's very easy to get like wrapped up in watching TikToks or watching instructional videos and make that feel like you're doing something. And I went through this with books. Like before there was all this social media stuff, I was consuming so many like business and self-help and spiritual books. And when you're in that study kind of mode, you really feel like you're doing something. But the reality is that you're just absorbing more and more knowledge. And yes, knowledge is power and all that stuff, but knowledge is only power if you put it into action. And what I'm finding, there's 2, I think, major problems with the social media. And not that I think you shouldn't do any social media, but I think we need to be consciously distracting ourselves instead of unconsciously distracting ourselves. And I'm seeing it all the time with my own social media. I go on social media to put my post up, and then like some little clip that I happen to see just as I'm in the process of making my own post captures my attention. Then 15 minutes later, I'm like, holy shit, I just went down a rabbit hole and I just wasted 15 minutes of my day kind of thing. And like, this is happening all the time. So I think some conscious escape, actually my wife is pretty good at this. At the end of the night, she says, okay, I'm going to scroll TikTok for a half hour, and so she's like consciously going into this place of distraction. But it's the unconscious distraction that I think is concerning. One is because it's delaying our ability to live out our full lives. This saying was around back with TV, where they were saying that TV is like you're sitting watching someone else live out their hopes and dreams kind of thing. And so it's a lot easier to watch somebody else do it than to do it yourself. So of course it's, we would get consumed by Netflix and all of these things. And you've just been seeing this happening more and more, and the binge watching of Netflix and TikTok that took that into a binge watching of short form content. And so one is we're giving away our own hopes and dreams, and we're watching other people live out theirs. So we want to be conscious of that. So we want to move into these places of distraction with some consciousness, awareness, I should say. I am going to distract myself now for the next hour or half hour. And I think that's healthy. But it's when we're unconscious that it becomes unhealthy. So the second thing that's happening with this is that because of the mass amount of information that is flooding our minds, it is becoming harder and harder to connect to the peace that exists in the present moment. And this is something that the ego or the mind resists as it is anyways, because the ego only survives in the past or in the future. And in the present moment, the ego essentially dies. And this is when you move into states of enlightenment, when you transcend ego, when you transcend body, mind. And so the ego will resist the present moment with everything it's got. So this is why it's so easy for us to get wrapped up in watching endless TikToks or watching series after series in Netflix or episode after episode of Netflix. is because the mind wants to remain in the future where we are living our best life, or wants to remain in the past in guilt and regret, whatever it may be. So in order to achieve, personal growth and to have awarenesses that are outside of the circle of what we know, we have to get tuned into the present moment. But it's becoming harder and harder with the amount of information that is flooding us at all times. So I think that this podcast is important because it's just to have the awareness of what is actually going on. Because even as like a spiritual student, I've been doing this work for a really long time. There was this moment last month where I was like, what is going on? Like, I just feel disconnected. I'm the type of person who I do pretty much everything intuitively. Like, even in my coaching practice, I'm relying on intuition, on a connection with something greater than myself to help that person. I'm basically saying, like, make me a vehicle, and what is it that this person needs most? And these are the most impactful sessions because it comes from outside the circle of what I know. It comes from this place of like collective consciousness, from energy of God, from source power, whatever it is that you want to call it. And when you step outside of that into the present moment, then the unknown is revealed to you. But if you're never connecting to the present moment, then the unknown is never revealed to you, and you get trapped in this, in this ego mind. So I came up with a few steps that I think that are really good for people that will help you get removed from the busyness that's happening in the mind. And the more busy our mind is, the less likely we are to have awarenesses that are outside of mind. So before I do that though, let me expand a little bit on what the circle of what we know is. So I use that term a lot. And so I usually do this where I hold up a ball and I say, this is the circle of everything that you've ever learned, all of your beliefs, all of your programs, everything you've ever been taught by your teachers, by your family, by your friends. And so anytime that we have a problem, we end up going into that circle to solve that problem. It's the circle of what we know. But Einstein said that a problem cannot be solved from the same level of consciousness it was created. So then that begs the question, okay, well, how do I get outside of my circle? Well, one way to get outside of your circle would be to like join like a mastermind group, because now not only do you have your circle, you have the circle of, 5 or 6 other people. And so that way you expand your circle. But if this circle represents everything that you have ever known, and 6 more of these circles in a mastermind represents everything that all of those people know, everything that you have yet to know could be represented by the entire space of this room. Right? And this is the infinite intelligence that we want to learn how to tap into. This is where we can align with an intention and just allow things to flow into our lives. And we only can do that when we get in the present moment. And this is all the stuff that Joe Dispenza is like out there proving. He's putting, electrons on people, or not electrodes on people's heads, and he's monitoring brainwave activity. And he's really tuning into when people are actually getting into this state where they become no one or nobody, and they are able to completely transform their lives in an instant. Because in that field, the quantum field we'll call it, things can happen like on a non-linear basis. And so it's really important for us to continue to do the work to make sure that we get connected to this energy. And the present moment also is like peaceful, right? It's like in the present moment there's like a ton of peace. But we very rarely experience the present moment, and because of that, we're not having any peace. And so if we want to start experiencing more peace, we have to start experiencing more present moment. But that's becoming harder and harder every single day because of where social media is headed. And if you want to really get deep into it, maybe there's like some conspiracy theories behind this, behind like, it's like, keep them down, keep them down, keep them down kind of thing, which is kind of like keep them dumb, keep them dumb, keep them dumb. And maybe at some level there's some evil power out there that's trying to keep us all mediocre and doesn't want us to step outside into this greater level of awareness. But that's neither here nor there. That's for a different podcast. So let's go into these steps here. The first one is, I think you got to get silent every single day. And I know that this is like everyone's saying meditate, but like if you look at the people that are like really, really high achievers, pretty much all of them put meditation at the top of their list. Here's the thing that I think I will offer that is different than most people is I think that you should meditate in silence. I think there's a place for guided meditations. I think they're great. And especially as a beginner, I think it's a good place to start. But I'm talking about the silence. I want to get to the silence. So my meditation practice is really simple. I just connect to my breath or some sort of place where I can keep my focus fixed. In the beginning, I used to use white noise. I would just turn on white noise on my phone, and I would keep all of my energy, all of my focus on that white noise. And then every time I would find my mind off on thought, I would bring my focus back to that white noise. And I just kept repeating that process. So the process is a thought pops up, you observe it, you bring your attention back to the white noise or to the breath, or just to the silence, right? And so the more you do this, the longer the periods come between the thoughts. And then eventually you get to this place where you're just picking up on the energy of the thought and you're surrendering that over, and you get into this stillness. And it takes time and it takes practice. But eventually, if you really commit to this, right, you're going to crave that space. You're going to want to be in that space. And someone described it to me once, which is like, we all have things that we do to keep our health in check. Like, like we go to the gym, we eat clean. We have things to keep our houses clean. We have things to keep our cars clean and our garages and our businesses and all of these things. But what are we doing to make sure that our mind remains like clean and reset? Like, what are we doing? We're brushing our teeth every day, but that's for our oral hygiene. But what are we doing for our mental hygiene? And for me, it's silence. And so if you're resistant to meditating, the way I started was I just made the commitment to doing just 1 minute every single day. And sure, there was days where I sat for 10 minutes, but the only commitment I made to myself was I had to do 1 minute every day. And some days I did just do 1 minute because I was busy or whatever it may be. But eventually what I started doing was just increasing that amount of time more and more and more and more. And as you do that, you're going to connect to the peace in the present moment. And as you connect to the peace in the present moment, the unknown is going to be revealed to you. So you're going to have awarenesses that you have been blocking or shoving down your whole entire life. And those awarenesses are the key to major transformation. Again, that would be for another podcast to get into exactly how that all works. But essentially what we want to do is we want to get silence at least once a day. Okay. I just basically do my meditation practice every morning. The second thing is we want to return to nature. And this was kind of like the reason I created Lungo Vita, right? And it's like, I want people to come out and be in nature without distraction. And ironically, if you go to Lungo Vita, the cell phone service sucks. We don't have any Wi-Fi. Like, it is meant to keep you disconnected, right? And people are going out in nature, but I see everyone out in nature and they got their headphones in and, they're texting as they're walking. And it's like, this is not the way we were meant to disconnect. When we are meant to disconnect, our phone should be on silent in our back pocket, or don't even bring your phone, and just be in nature. Tune into the energy of all of the plants and animals around you, and just allow yourself to be present. I do this on walks and runs as I just keep my focus on the path in front of me. And every time my mind goes off in thought, I just return my focus to the path in front of me. So this is kind of like a walking meditation. And it also is like in silence. Another thing that I do that actually wasn't on this list is when I drive in my car, I will for sure at least once a day drive in my car for 5 or 10 minutes with the radio off, right? And this is not so much of a trying to connect to the silence, but I'm just taking a step back and observing my thoughts throughout the time in my car. And when you really begin to learn how to step back and observe your thoughts, you're gonna quickly realize that how neurotic your mind actually really is. It is just busy. And the more you learn to step back, the more the mind in some ways will start to try and find ways to like say, hey, I'm still here, I'm still here. It'll just start singing a song, right? And it's all about the ego's clinging to survival as you get to these more advanced states. Is like the ego will just want to keep showing up to say like, hey, I'm still you. And you've made the realization or the connection that you are something greater than mind. But the mind is like fighting with everything that it has to try and not die, essentially. And so that would lead me to the fifth or fourth step would be, which is just to learn how to move into observer. A great book to step you into observer is The Untethered Soul. That book does a great job of creating understanding around this idea that we are something greater than our mind. And he does a couple examples where he shows you how to just observe your mind. And you can do it here with me now, is you can just close your eyes and you can observe your inner voice saying hello. So just make your inner voice say hello. And now make your inner voice say hello 3 times. And now make your inner voice scream hello. So now if you're closing your eyes, or hopefully if you're driving, hopefully you weren't closing your eyes. But what we were able to do there in that moment was we were able to observe our minds. So the mind could observe the body, right? I can say, raise my hand, and that's what happens here, and it happens unconsciously as well. But what is it that allows us to observe our minds? The mind can't observe the mind, right? And so what allows us to observe our mind is our consciousness, our soul, our essence, our energy, whatever it is, the thing that in us that is eternal, okay? And a good way to start grasping that is we believe we are mind and body. That's where 99% of the world is trapped, in this belief that we are mind and body, and that we are limited in this life. But if I were to chop your arm off, are you still you, even though you don't have a part of your body? And the answer, of course, is yes. And it's like I could chop off all of your arms, both your legs, and it's like, are you still you? And the answer is yes. And so the same thing happens to us when we die. It's like we no longer have body and mind. And so are you still you? And the answer, of course, is yes, right? And so as we begin to connect with this higher self, we can then start taking this step back from mind more. The more we step back from mind, the more we can observe what our mind is telling us. And as we begin to observe what our mind is telling us, we start to realize that everything the mind is telling us is all from a place of protection. So the ego has one primary function, and that's to keep us safe. And it has developed programs, systems, beliefs. All of these are to keep us safe. These programs, these survival patterns, that they've been called, these are the things that are limiting us most from living our best life. And they're all protecting us from some sort of emotional pain, usually, right? So, for example, the survival pattern of people pleasing for me was all about wanting everybody to like me. And so I just became this people pleaser, and I wanted everyone to like me so I didn't have to feel the pain of being disliked. Pretty simple, right? So I recognized that by learning to observe the mind and learning to recognize that I've been in this state of people pleasing. And then what that allowed me to do was it allowed me to then begin to do the work and allow myself to sit in the pain of being disliked. I had to go back to those moments where I was disliked, or where I was ridiculed or bullied or whatever that may be. And I had to allow myself to experience that pain. Once I was okay with that pain, once I had sat in it long enough, then I no longer needed the program of people pleasing. I no longer cared whether people liked me or not, because I was okay with the pain of being disliked. And I'm really paraphrasing this thing here. Obviously, it goes a little bit deeper, but this is essentially everything that the mind is doing. If you begin to really step back from the mind, you are going to recognize that there are only about 5 or 6 containers of things the mind is telling you. Okay? So, for example, the mind may be telling you that you're broke, and that the container of being broke, if we labeled one of the containers of being broke, will be filled with tens of thousands of thoughts every single day, right? And if you're unconscious of it all, you are letting the body and mind run the show, right? It's with this step back that we can then begin to see what it is the mind is telling us. And then from there, we can then begin to see why, and then begin to ask the question, I should say, why is the mind telling us this, and what is it protecting us from? Once we learn what it's protecting us from, we can then begin to do the work to make sure that we can face that thing that we have been protecting ourselves from our whole entire lives. And when we do that, we become free, right? And so everyone thinks that freedom exists out there. Freedom exists with more money, with more things, with a bigger house, whatever it may be. Free from the 9 to 5, but the freedom exists from within. The freedom exists from having the courage to look at the things that we've been avoiding most. And once we do that, then we begin to shut the mind down, right? All of this, though, only comes from when we create the space to step back and observe the mind. And I'm finding that for me personally, it has been harder and harder for me to do that because of the influence of this constant information. Okay. And so then the other thing, that the other step I would say would be to set a conscious time of when you're going to participate in social media, right? Or distraction. Alex Hormozi says, like, and he's like an insane producer, right? He produces at a level that I will probably never even understand. And he says, at the end of the day, like, I just binge Netflix, right? He's consciously choosing to just shut his mind off. I think that's okay to do that as long as it's conscious. So just making conscious time for social media, I think, is important. And then the last step I think that I want to cover is that the whole entire world has become insanely busy. And when people are wearing that like a badge of honor, I know I've worn the badge of honor of busyness before. And if you pretty much ask anybody, you're going to be seeing people over the holidays here. It's like, how are things? Busy. And it's like, well, is that something that we really are striving to be? It's like, we're saying it like it's this good thing, but it's like, being busy sucks, right? It's like being busy to me is different from being productive. And the one thing that I realize is that in order for me to produce at the highest level, the last thing that I need to be is busy. And it's the busyness that prevents us from doing the things that are the most critical. And I had this awareness when I took this step back, and I was busy building Lungo Vita. I was in it. And I usually go to Florida with my family for a month every winter, and I was thinking that I couldn't do it. Everything in my being was like, no, man, I'm too busy. And I finally said, no, forget it, we're doing it. And I took this step back, and from that step back, from the busyness came so much clarity. And the clarity was that I was doing a job that I could pay somebody $50,000 a year to do. And I don't believe I'm a $50,000 a year person. I believe I'm $1 million a year person. And so there was a $900,000 or $950,000 gap in what I was doing and what I could be potentially doing. And that clarity could have never have come to me without that slowing down. And so I just want to encourage you to, look at that to-do list and just see what can be eliminated, removed, delegated, whatever that may be, so that you can create the space to do the work that is critical for whatever it is that you want to do. And this doesn't just apply to business. This applies to personal growth, spiritual development, increasing, having closer and connected relationships. None of that can happen when the mind is busy. And we are moving to this place in this world where it is going to be the people that know how to disconnect, that know how to remove themselves from the noise, that are going to be the ones that excel the most, because the rest of the world is like getting hypnotized by distraction and influencers and media, big media. They're becoming so good at gaining our attention, and if we're not careful, like I say, we can give all of our hopes and dreams away to a few hooks. And so that's not the life that I want for myself. It's not the life I want for the people that are listening to this, because if you're listening to this podcast, I'm guessing that you're connected to achieving higher states of consciousness. And I just wanted to bring all of this into our awareness. So just as a review, you need to get silent. You need to get in nature without distraction. You want to take this step back from mind, which I think is huge. Driving your car, this is another kind of like practical tip, with your radio off 5-10 minutes a day. If you're using social media or Netflix or whatever that may be, make sure it's conscious escape, right? It's one thing to escape consciously. It's another thing to escape unconsciously, right? But this could be applied to anything that we're doing to ease pain. So if it's food, if it's alcohol, whatever, we want to be aware that we are consciously choosing to eat a big giant bowl of ice cream so we don't have to feel the stress that we're experiencing because we don't have enough money, for example. And then the last thing is just to take a step back and slow down. And if you don't feel like you can slow down, that is the most important time to slow down, because that's where the most clarity is going to come. And I think if you begin to just take some of these tactics, if you just took one, and you can create the space to experience the peace that exists in the present moment. That one moment of peace is more healing than pretty much anything that you can add out there. It's not peace of mind that we're seeking. It's peace from mind. And the only way to get peace from mind is to learn to get silent and take that step back. And if you can do that, the unknown will be revealed to you, and you'll be able to accomplish, achieve, manifest whatever it is that you want to achieve or whatever you want to bring into your life. And this is the power that exists. This is the power that's existed for, since the beginning of time. And I just want to be tapping into that power as much as possible. And we all have to be careful because it's really easy to get distracted. So if you got any value at all from this podcast, I just encourage you to hit that subscribe button, to follow us. The podcast is about attaining higher states of consciousness, and we're continuing to make sure that we bring as much value as we possibly can. So I really appreciate the follow or the subscribe, and we'll see you again next Sunday.